Hi everyone. Today we would like for you to complete this worksheet about what is wrong with these surveys. This is our first day of our next unit, Unit 3, collecting data. So we just want to start off with what can go wrong when we try to collect data. And so first I want you guys to just read through each of these scenarios and answer questions A and B about the problem with them and what could be the consequence. So take a second or a minute and pause the video, do that, and then come back to see some answers and some definitions. All right, so start with number 1. What is wrong with this survey? They reach out by finding the average age, or they want to find out the average age. And so they reach out to obtain a list of all landline telephones in the city and then contact the simple random sample of people with landlines. So what is wrong with this survey? Well, the question I posed in my answer was, who even has a landline anymore? And so that is definitely a big problem. I want to also highlight a couple of other things about this. So people in the city would be our population that I want to write down. And then a simple random sample of 300 people is our sample. So we have two different things. We take a sample to learn more about the population. And what we want to learn about this population is their average age. So not only do many people not have a landline, but the people that do tend to be older. And so I think this would be an overestimate because only older people have landlines typically. Not always, but that's going to be the case here. And so this is called undercoverage, because we aren't reaching people without landlines. And so I'm going to write a little note. People without landlines are not included. Well, and that could be any type of survey, that like surveys through email. Well, not everyone has an email. Surveys through Twitter. Not everyone's on Twitter. Things like that. And so that is called undercoverage. Next, we have the administration at a school wants to know the proportion of students that copied their homework last night. So remember, students is your population, and then they select a simple random sample of 100 students, which is our sample, and they email them asking if they copied their homework last night. So of the 40 responses, 2 students said that they did copy their homework, which is 5%. So what's wrong with this survey? First, only 40 people responded out of 100. And so that is our first problem that I wrote down. 60 students didn't respond. And then the second problem I wrote down was that the people that did might not admit to cheating or copying on their homework, so they might be lying. That's going to be 2 sources of bias here that we will see. They'll probably underestimate the proportion of students that copy their homework. So first, didn't respond. That is called, very cleverly, non-response bias. And then lying is a type of something called response bias. So this actually suffers from both non-response bias and response bias, because a large proportion of the sample did not respond, which is non-response, and those that did respond might be lying, and so their response may be inaccurate, which is called response bias. And then we think that it probably underestimates the students, the proportion that did copy their homework. Okay, next, number 3, Boy Scout Peter M wants to know the proportion of people in his neighborhood who support the Boy Scouts. Takes a simple random sample of 30 homes and visits them dressed in his uniform. So here he is, a Boy Scout, showing up at your door wearing his uniform, looking all cute, and he asks, do you support the Boy Scouts? And I don't know many people that are going to say no while he's wearing his uniform in front of them. And so he's pressuring them to answer yes by wearing his uniform, which is also a form of response bias, because they're receiving pressure to give a different answer than they might already give. And so it does come back to kind of like, you don't want to use the word lying because they're not maybe being deceitful on purpose, but they're feeling pressured to answer a certain way. So response bias can happen in a lot of different ways. You can either really lie, or you can feel pressured to say something that you don't actually feel, which is still kind of lying. So wording bias of a question, wearing the uniform while doing the survey, that type of stuff is going to cause response bias. Okay, last question we have is a trucking company wants to know the proportion of its drivers that get complaints while on the road. So they put a phone number on the truck and they say, how's my driving? So you guys have seen those when you're driving around and you see, how's my driving? And it's probably the case with you, as it is with me, that unless that truck driver is doing something very bad, I'm not going to call and tell them that he's doing a great job, or she. I'm not going to call the phone and say, I just want to let you know this truck driver is a really great driver. But if they, cut me off or are driving really erratically, then I might feel inclined to call and complain about it. And so I wrote my explanation. The problem is that people who phone in are usually really fired up about something. And so they'll be fired up about something negative, usually in this case. And then this is called, there's two things. When you phone in, that is voluntary response bias. And that leads to problems because if you volunteer to respond, then you might have something specific to say that is similar to other people who volunteer to respond. And you might feel differently than people who don't volunteer to respond, who decide to keep on going with their day without calling about a truck driver's driving. And so you might be overestimating the proportion of trucks that get complaints because people only call about negative things. There's this saying about reviews. People leave reviews on different services. And it says, if you have a bad experience somewhere, you'll tell 10 friends about it. If you have a good experience somewhere, you'll tell 3 friends about it. Something like that, where people are just more likely to share when they've had a bad experience to try to keep other people from having that bad experience, but less likely to call in and say about something good. So those are the types of bias that we talked about here. Now I want to go into the important ideas box and explain some of these types a little further, and then just define bias as a whole. So first, bias is when you typically overestimate or underestimate the true value. I'm going to write a little note. I'm going to circle that overestimating or underestimating, and I'm going to do it again. And I always spell something wrong there. Underestimating. And we're going to say you must include the direction, over or under, when describing. Ran out of room. Hopefully you guys did a better job on your paper. And so that's really important part of the definition, and it's going to be an important part of describing it on a test or a quiz as well. We have a couple types that we deal with. We have undercoverage, when some members of the population cannot be or are less likely to be chosen, like the landlines example. We have non-response, when an individual is selected but chooses not to respond or isn't reached. So maybe I get a lot of phone calls from numbers I don't know, and I never answer them. So I'm not responding. I'm choosing not to answer it, and they haven't been able to reach me. I ignore a lot of emails with surveys in them, stuff like that. That is different than voluntary response. Voluntary response is when they put themselves in the study. I didn't ask to get those emails or those phone calls. I did make the choice not to respond, but I never volunteered to be a part of that study. So volunteering is specifically when you put yourself in there. And then response bias is a pattern of inaccurate responses. So it could be inaccurate in any way, like maybe the wording of the question leads you to feel one way or to answer one way. You have pressure from the interviewer. There should be a space between those, like wearing the uniform. Maybe you're not comfortable telling the truth and you lie about it, like cheating on your homework. So those are all types of response bias. We see that a lot with, like polls. That's why polls have become pretty unreliable before the elections, because it's a really hard way. It's really hard for the polling companies to reach people. So there's a lot of non-response bias. And then the methods that they're using to reach them could lead to undercoverage, because the methods they're using might leave out entire groups of people. And then we have response bias could also play a factor because the people, when they get asked, might not tell the truth. So that is all three of those things are kind of like working against the polling companies these days. We'll talk more about different methods they have to try to get accurate data as we go through this unit. I put a little note here for convenience sample. That didn't come up in our activity today, but it will come up in future activities. And so I wanted to just add it because it's part of the check your understanding below. A convenience sample is just defined as already as what it sounds like. It's an easy way to take a sample. If I had you guys in my class, I just asked you all to do a survey really quickly while you're in my class. That would be convenient for me to collect data. That's a convenient sample. When you meet people on the street, stuff like that, it's biased because everyone in that convenient sample in that setting could have something in common that requires that. What's the word I'm looking for? That makes them inclined to answer a specific way. Okay, so now pause this and try the check your understanding. All right, on pause, and hopefully you were able to use our notes. I really had some trouble spelling today or in this lesson. Hopefully you were able to use our notes and answer these questions with that. I'll just fix some spelling mistakes here. Directory should have a D, and then with, let's see if it will, there, with numbers in the phone directory can be chosen. And so the first one was under coverage, the second one was non-response, and then the last one was that convenience sample I was just talking about. And so that was number one. You guys look that over. You can pause it to look it over. And then on number two, we had this question. It is estimated that disposable diapers account for less than 2% of the trash in today's landfills. In contrast, beverage containers, third-class mail, yard waste are estimated to account for 21% of the trash in the landfills. Given this, in your opinion, would it be fair to ban disposable diapers? And so that is just a lot of words, and they're clearly leading you to saying it's not fair to ban disposable diapers when they account for so much less of the trash than these other things. They shouldn't have given all that information about the other things. They should just let people decide on what they think. And so it does lead them towards a specific answer. You'll see that a lot in political polls or polls on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. I want to make one comment. Oppose banning is it's like a double negative. If I oppose the ban of something, then I'm for it. So be careful with this. It's like a double negative. So that means 84% of the sample is for disposable diapers. So you gotta be, that stats is gonna be full of stuff like that for you to make sure you can decipher properly. Okay, so you guys are done with this lesson. Thank you for listening and taking good notes, and we will see you next class. Have a great day.